In the early summer of 2025, the long-simmering tensions between the United States and Iran boiled over into direct military conflict. The immediate trigger for the American action was a dramatic escalation in the Middle East, specifically a 12-day conflict that had erupted between Israel and Iran. This regional clash brought the long-standing shadow war between the two nations into the open, raising fears of a much wider, more devastating confrontation. For years, the international community had watched with growing anxiety as Iran advanced its nuclear program, especially after the United States, under President Donald Trump, withdrew from the 2015 nuclear deal known as the JCPOA. Washington viewed Tehran's enrichment of uranium to near weapons-grade levels as a direct threat to global security and a violation of its red lines. The background to this strike is rooted in years of diplomatic failures and increasing mistrust. After the US left the JCPOA in 2018, Iran began to systematically shed the restrictions the agreement had placed on its nuclear activities. This included installing more advanced centrifuges and accumulating a stockpile of highly enriched uranium, bringing it closer than ever to the capability of building a nuclear weapon. The United States and its allies, particularly Israel, saw this as an unacceptable development. A series of indirect talks held in places like Oman had repeatedly failed to produce a breakthrough, leaving the diplomatic path seemingly exhausted and paving the way for a more forceful approach to address the perceived imminent threat. President Trump's administration had long maintained a policy of maximum pressure against Iran, using heavy economic sanctions to try and force Tehran back to the negotiating table on more favorable terms. However, this strategy did not halt Iran's nuclear progress. The decision to launch a military strike represented a significant shift, moving from economic and diplomatic pressure to direct kinetic action. The White House justified the move as a necessary defensive measure, designed to neutralize a clear and present danger not only to U.S. allies in the region, but also to international peace and stability. The stated goal was simple and direct: to cripple Iran's ability to produce a nuclear bomb for the foreseeable future. The timing of the strike, coming on the heels of the Israel-Iran conflict, was critical. A fragile truce brokered by the United States had ended the direct fighting but did not include any provisions for Iran to dismantle its nuclear infrastructure. This left a core point of contention unresolved. Washington likely saw this moment as a strategic window of opportunity. With global attention already focused on the region and Iran potentially weakened from its recent clash with Israel, the U.S. calculated that a decisive strike could achieve its objectives while managing the risk of a broader escalation. The action was framed not as an act of war but as a limited, targeted operation to enforce international non-proliferation norms. The United States military operation was meticulously planned to inflict maximum damage on the key nodes of Iran's nuclear program. The primary objective was to destroy the infrastructure necessary for uranium enrichment and weaponization. To achieve this, American forces targeted several of Iran's most important and heavily fortified nuclear sites. Among them were the Fordo fuel enrichment plant, built deep inside a mountain to protect it from air attack, the Natanz complex, Iran's main uranium enrichment facility, and the Isfahan site, which is crucial for converting uranium ore into a gas that can be fed into centrifuges. These three locations formed the heart of Iran's declared nuclear ambitions, making them the logical focus of the American assault. To penetrate these hardened facilities, the U.S. military deployed some of its most powerful conventional weapons. The centerpiece of the attack was the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, a 30,000-pound bunker-busting bomb designed specifically to destroy deeply buried targets. These powerful munitions were used against sites like Fordo, aiming to collapse the underground tunnels and destroy the sensitive centrifuge cascades housed within. The scale of the attack was significant, intended to send an unambiguous message about American military capability and its resolve to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran. The operation was swift, precise, and aimed to avoid widespread collateral damage, focusing exclusively on the nuclear infrastructure itself. Following the strikes, there were immediately conflicting assessments about their success. President Trump declared the mission an overwhelming victory, stating that the targeted Iranian sites had been obliterated. This sentiment was echoed by the U.S. Secretary of Defense, who reported that the facilities were destroyed. These statements painted a picture of a decisive blow that had effectively reset Iran's nuclear clock. However, other sources offered a more nuanced and cautious view. Officials from the International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA, confirmed significant damage but noted that some infrastructure likely survived deep underground, suggesting that Iran could, in time, restart its activities. The full extent of the destruction remained difficult to verify independently. This uncertainty was compounded by intelligence intercepts and expert analysis. A preliminary report from the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency suggested that while the damage was substantial, it fell short of total destruction. Furthermore, U.S. intelligence reportedly intercepted a communication between senior Iranian officials who assessed the attack as less devastating than they had expected. Experts pointed out that the status of Iran's centrifuge technology and its existing stockpile of enriched uranium was still unknown. It was also reported that at least one key site was not hit with the most powerful bunker-busting bombs, raising questions about whether crucial elements of the program had survived the assault intact. In the wake of the American airstrikes, Iran's response was swift and multifaceted, unfolding across military, political, and cyber domains. Militarily, Tehran launched a retaliatory missile strike aimed at a major U.S. base in Qatar. This action was carefully calibrated. It was significant enough to be seen as a forceful reply for its domestic audience, but it was also telegraphed. Reports indicated that the U.S. had received advance warning of the incoming attack, allowing its forces to take cover and for missile defense systems to be fully prepared. As a result, the Iranian missiles were intercepted, and the attack caused no significant damage or casualties. The White House dismissed the move as a face-saving measure, designed to project strength without provoking a massive American counterattack. The most significant and potentially long-lasting retaliation came on the political and diplomatic front. In a move of defiance, Iran's parliament immediately began drafting legislation to withdraw the country from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or NPT, the cornerstone of global efforts to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons. Furthermore, lawmakers passed a bill to cease all cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA. This decision, if fully implemented, would be a game-changer. It would mean the end of all international inspections and monitoring of Iran's nuclear activities, effectively plunging the program into a black box and leaving the world completely in the dark about its scope and intentions. Publicly, Iran's leadership worked hard to project an image of resilience and defiance. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the country's ultimate authority, addressed the nation and downplayed the impact of the American attack, claiming it had done nothing significant, and that Iran would emerge stronger. This rhetoric was aimed at shoring up domestic morale and reinforcing the narrative that the Islamic Republic would not be bowed by foreign pressure. Behind the scenes, the attack forced the collapse of the few remaining diplomatic channels. A scheduled round of indirect talks with the U.S. and Oman was canceled, and Iran recalled its negotiators, signaling an end to any immediate prospect of a negotiated resolution to the crisis. Finally, Iran appeared to activate its cyber warfare capabilities. Shortly after the physical strikes, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security issued a bulletin warning of a heightened risk of Iranian cyber attacks targeting American critical infrastructure. This included sectors like finance, energy, and transportation. This form of asymmetric retaliation allows Iran to strike back at the United States without engaging in direct military confrontation, a domain where it is at a significant disadvantage. The cyber threat represents a new, shadowy front in the conflict, one that is difficult to attribute and can have far-reaching disruptive effects on civilian life, demonstrating that the fallout from the military strike was far from over. The international reaction to the U.S. strike was a mixture of cautious support, condemnation, and deep concern. Israel, Iran's staunchest regional adversary, was the most vocal supporter of the American action. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised the strike as a necessary step to protect the world from a rogue nuclear threat. He went further, issuing a stark warning that Israel would not hesitate to conduct its own strikes if Iran ever attempted to revive its nuclear program. However, this hawkish stance was tempered by a clear message from Washington. Israel should not expect further direct American offensive military action. The U.S. had acted, and it now expected its allies to manage the subsequent fallout without dragging it into a wider war. Other global powers reacted with far more apprehension. European allies, while sharing U.S. concerns over Iran's nuclear ambitions, had long favored diplomacy. and were troubled by the unilateral military action, fearing it would destabilize the region further. Russia and China, traditional partners of Iran, condemned the strike as a violation of international law and a dangerous provocation. The attack effectively shattered any semblance of international unity on the Iran issue, leaving a fractured diplomatic landscape. The immediate consequence was the creation of a more volatile and unpredictable Middle East, where the lines between conflict and containment became dangerously blurred for all international actors. The most profound impact of this crisis is the dangerous precedent it sets for global peace and security. The U.S. strike, followed by Iran's decision to abandon the NPT and IAEA inspections, has severely damaged the global non-proliferation architecture. This framework, built over decades, relies on treaties, verification, and diplomacy to prevent the spread of the world's deadliest weapons. The events of June 2025 have shown that this system can be bypassed by unilateral military force, potentially encouraging other nations to pursue their own nuclear deterrence outside of international norms. The world is now facing the grim possibility of a new nuclear arms race in one of its most volatile regions. Ultimately, this situation remains critically important because the path forward is fraught with peril. With diplomatic channels severed and Iran's nuclear program now operating without any international oversight, the risk of miscalculation is extraordinarily high. Any future incident, whether a proxy attack, a cyber breach, or a maritime confrontation in the Persian Gulf, could quickly spiral into a full-scale regional war with devastating global consequences. The world now holds its breath, watching to see if diplomacy can be resurrected from the ashes, or if the Middle East is destined to slide further into a conflict that no one can truly control, and from which no one will emerge a true victor.